Alright, so this is my buddy's Malibu. It's a Turbo 5.3. I'm going to be finishing up for him. I got to wire up the Holley, get it all set up, and finish the turbo kit. He bought a tubular core support we're going to do. I just got to mount up the radiator, intercooler, and all that fun stuff. Alright, so I just started working on this thing a little bit. I got the tubular core support bolted on, and these old GM cars, they have so much adjustment, it's not even funny. I literally spent hours just trying to adjust everything, the fenders, the hood, the core support, everything, just to get it to slightly line up. And I got it close enough to start building off of. I don't want to have it way off and build off of it, and then when the guy that owns it goes to adjust it and everything's messed up or way off or whatever. But it's a really nice piece. I got it bolted on and got the radiator mounted up, and got the intercooler mounted up, and the only thing I had to trim was the grill. The inside of the grill I trimmed just a little bit to make it fit. It really didn't take that much. It cleared the bumper perfectly, so that was a relief. But clears the grill perfectly, nice and clean, factory looking. And now I can start building off the intercooler. Well, I got the intercooler piping all welded up on this thing, and I've been really spoiled with higher grade aluminum. I forget that the Chinese aluminum doesn't weld very nice, but I did the best that I could. It just spitting and popping on me, just the porosity and stuff in it. But I just cleaned it up as good as I could, just kept going. But I got them all welded up. I try to make them the least amount of couplers as possible. I got this side all solid one piece, and the turbo side all solid one piece. And I mean, it's a little tricky getting in there, but it's well worth it, making one solid piece. Sometimes you can't. I've done cars where you literally cannot get the pipe in one solid piece. You'll have to make one more joint in it. It's not the end of the world, but the least amount of couplers the better. But now I just got to weld the blow-off valve flange on. I'm going to do that in a second. Anyways, I'm going to walk you guys through how to do the first startup. I just tested everything. I got power to everything that needs power, all the relays and everything, and I found the starter wire in a stock harness because he wants to have everything on the key. So I have all that figured out and wired up. So I'm going to hook up my laptop and go through the steps. It's pretty straightforward. It's not real difficult, but I want to do a quick video to help the guys out that just wanted to figure out how to do it real quick, you know. But one thing for sure is that you want to make sure the wideband is unplugged. Do not have it, the O2 sensor, do not have it plugged in until you have it set to the right O2 sensor. This is an HP. The Terminator only has one O2 sensor that comes with some Bosch, I forget which number. It only comes with one. The HP and the Dominator will come with an NTK or a Bosch. And you have to set that up in the software, and I'll show you guys how to do that. If you give power to the ECU with that plugged in and set to the wrong one, it'll burn it up. But other than that, you know, just making sure all your wiring is good. You got power where you need, ground where you need before you start putting power to the ECU. That ECU is the last thing I plug in. So I would just make sure, double check, triple check, everything's good, and then you can start going to the fun stuff with the laptop. Alright, when you screw this USB cable into an HP or a Dominator, make sure you get it in there nice and straight and it goes in smooth and it's not fighting. You're not fighting it when you're screwing it in, because they can crack and then you're screwed. You gotta buy another one, or if you break it on the ECU, then you gotta get it repaired. And what I do normally when I'm all done with the wiring and everything, I'll zip tie it really tight somewhere to where even if you actually yank on this, it's pulling from the zip tie and not from the ECU. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the system ICF, and go over here to wideband O2 sensor. That's what I was talking about earlier. And he does have an NTK, so you just go down to the drop down, hit NTK, And I have a base tune that I start with every car and then adjust accordingly for the injector size and all that stuff. Now I gotta figure out what injectors are in this thing, I forget. And we'll get to setting up the base tune, and then we'll connect to the ECU and do a firmware update. That's the first thing you'll have to do. I'll show you guys how to do that. Alright, so I turned the power on, my gauges came on, I got voltage and everything. So I'm going to open up a base tune I made for this car. I have a base tune I start off with every car, and then I'll just change whatever injector data and just minor things depending on if it's a Gen 4 or Gen 3 motor or whatever, you know. But the fueling and the timing is all the same, and I just start out with that, then adjust accordingly. So I just open up my base tune, USB link, and this thing's never been ran before. It came brand new out of the box. This is what it says: TPS auto reset needs to be performed before startup. Just click OK. Just have to remember to do that because the sucker won't start unless the TPS is set. Then it says the minimum ECU firmware version to operate properly is 5.0 build 160. The software I'm running is version 5 build 160. There's no telling what's actually on the ECU. So I'm going to have to update the firmware, and that's normal. You got to do that on every ECU because they come up with new versions of the software constantly. And you know, I connect to a few different cars off and on, and I got to keep up to date, and I constantly have to do firmware updates on ECUs. And it's kind of annoying. It could take like 30 minutes to do, but it's just part of it. And it says you're currently running 4.0 build 64. That's an old version. I think he bought this ECU a while ago. So I just click OK, and it says software firmware conflict. Okay. I just hit exit because there's nothing else I could do. Closing the sync window during syncing may cause problems. I want to close. If you buy an ECU and get it going pretty quick, it's going to be close enough you're not going to have this issue, but I think he bought this thing quite a while ago because version 5 has been out for a while now. So just click on this tab here and go down to upgrade firmware. If you choose to proceed with a firmware update, the configuration stored on the ECU will be lost. So that's just saying the ECU is going to be swiped clean when you do an update. So if your car's already running and you have a good tune on it and it has all your inputs and outputs and everything, be sure and save that tune on your laptop before you do an update because it'll be gone. Just click OK. Before flashing the firmware, all other windows will be closed and the ECU will be put offline. Yes, continue. And it'll open up over here in your Holley file on your laptop, and you just click what version. I've had to update a couple different times. I'm on 160. I think they're got a new version out now, 170 or something, but I'm just doing 160 for now until I have to update. And you just click OK and let it do its thing, and it'll take a while. Like I said, it'll take like 30 minutes or so. One thing I didn't tell you guys is be sure before you start doing an update that you have plenty of battery in your car and you have plenty of battery on your laptop. I've never done it, but I've heard of people bricking the ECU from running out of battery and it dying or whatever in the middle of an update. So be sure that your laptop's charged and your battery is charged on your car. So 30 minutes later, it's done updating the firmware on the ECU. says the update was successful. Controller is now rebooting. Just click OK. If it does fail and it shows an error, you could Google what the error means. But I have had that happen a couple times. I've gotten lucky where I just restart the update, just start over from the beginning, and it does fine. But I have heard that people have bricked ECUs from updating, but luckily I haven't done that yet. Another thing is with your laptop, if it goes to like sleep mode or something after a certain amount of minutes, you want to make sure to either turn that off or just stay by it and constantly move your mouse. I make it a habit of watching it and just move my mouse every couple of minutes, just so it doesn't go into sleep mode in the middle of an update. It's just reminding me to do TPS reset. Okay, it's been set to HP EFI. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go over to File and open Global File. Gotta be offline to do that, I guess. I'm gonna find my bass tune. I'm not gonna save changes. And I opened up my bass tune. I click USB link, trying to connect to the ECU, and this is what comes up. It shows everything is different. It's all failed. That's what it'll do. If the tune is different than what's on the ECU, it'll show you right here. You can either get from ECU, so you open up the tune that's on the ECU, or you send to ECU, and that's sending what tune's on your laptop to the ECU. So we want to send the ECU. Fuel pump just kicked on. And oh, I got a fuel leak. I hear it. I tightened up all the fuel lines, I thought, but we got a fuel leak. I just heard it. So I'm going to go through it and figure that out. Well, it looks like all the fittings are tight. It looks like where the hose goes into a fitting is spitting out. The fuel system was already plumbed when I got this car, and most of the fittings were loose. I tightened them all up, but one of those hoses must not seated well, so I'm going to take it all back apart and figure that out before I get started. So that kind of stinks, but it is what it is. But I went ahead and unplugged the fuel pumps from the relays so I could still show you guys how to do everything, and then I'll fix that fuel line later. But see, that time, since the tune-up was the same on the ECU that is here, everything's green, everything's passed, so no differences. I'm going to go ahead and do a TPS reset. You go back over here on the same tab, the sync with ECU tab, the same one you do for the firmware update, and you just scroll down to TPS auto set, click on that, click OK. It'll say make sure ignition is on, engine is not started, then select ready, or select start when ready. Then you slowly press the pedal up and down twice. Done. Successful. Reading TPS. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to go over here to System ICF. And I forget it. There's a lot of things you can't do when you're online. So you might have to kick offline and make the adjustments you need. It is an NTK wideband sensor, and I already changed that in this tune. On the HPs and the Dominators, you can have an NTK or a Bosch. Got an NTK. And he has the 83 pound Holleys. That one's already in there. You just go to the fuel system, system type, and find it. There's a lot in here, but there's not all of them's in here. So if you have one that's not in here, you'll have to Google it and look it up, you know, what injector data you need or whatever. And then normally at this point I would check the fuel pressure and get it to where I need to. Right here, down here with the injector data, it has the fuel pressure that the injector is rated for. You leave that alone. Whatever they're rated for, you leave it alone. Then up here is actual system pressure. You set that to where what your regulator is set at. And depending on where your fuel system's at, what you're wanting to do, normally we'll just set it to where it's rated at. So it's rated at 43, we set it at 43. Now if you start running out of fuel pump but you have plenty of injector, you can lower your base pressure and change it in there, and you can make more power on less pressure, base pressure, because your pumps will pump more flow at a lower pressure than higher pressure. Every pump starts to run out. Well, at least the pumps we run. You know, if you run like a really fancy mechanical pump or something, they'll build all the pressure you want and still flow really well. But on these little budget electric pumps we have, they start to die out pretty quick when pressure starts getting up there. And they have graphs and stuff. You can Google it and look up whatever how much they'll flow at a certain pressure. But like my car, I got two AM380s. It won't make much power on those on the 85, so I lowered the base pressure down to 35 pounds and they'll go farther, you know. But anyways, enough of that. And then you just make sure your ignition type is where it needs to be. This is the Gen 3 24X motor. Just make sure the ignition type is where it is on 24X. And really, I just go through everything and make sure everything looks right. And you go over here to sensors and set up what sensor you have. He's got a GM 3-bar. I'm just going to set it as a Holley 3-bar. And then I'll test it and make sure it's reading accurately. You can do an offset here if you need to do an offset if it's off a little bit. And you can also do a custom if you need to do a custom. If it's not reading right, you can do a custom and it'll have a graph that's voltage related, voltage versus map. And then you got your coolant temp. I got the Holley coolant temp, Holley manifold air temp, oil pressure. I got a Holley 100 PSI transducer in there. Same thing with the fuel pressure. It's a 100 PSI pressure transducer. I'll save all those changes. Connect back up. Now you can see a bunch of stuff has changed. Send to ECU. It's just telling me that some of the changes I made will require ignition power cycle. Okay, no big deal. I'm trying to think of what else to show you guys. After you get them running, it's really smart to go ahead and verify the timing and stuff. I'll do that on this one too, because a lot of them are off. They're not dead on, and it's nice to know how far off you are. Because I mean, I've heard of guys having them off 5 to 8 degrees, and that's a big difference. And I've done a video on that before, so you guys can look up that video. But now I got the right wideband in there. I can go and plug it up, and really I'm to the point now where I could start it if I didn't have a fuel leak. So I'm gonna dig into that, try to figure that out, and I'll get back with you guys and try to get this thing started up. Well, I think I fixed the fuel leak. I hope. I turned the pump on for a minute and let it prime, and I didn't see any leaking from it. But so now I need to set the fuel pressure. So what I'll do is normally to really set it up the way it's supposed to be set up is you're supposed to have the vehicle running with no pressure source to the regulator and set it to your desired amount. But you can also do it, force the fuel pump on without the engine running, because it's going to be the same thing basically, and set it to where you want it. I went ahead and when that line started leaking, I loosened the fuel pressure regulator up all the way. Sometimes when you just put them together, they're way too tight, and you can have a crazy amount of fuel pressure. So right now I'm gonna change the. You can go to engine parameters, and you can change the fuel pump prime. It's at 4 seconds now. You could do 999 seconds. And that'll just run it for 999 seconds, and that should be enough time to set the fuel pressure accurately. Well, I had another fitting leak, and it's just boogered up. There's nothing I can do about it. It's the little adapter you can put on the end of the rail for the fuel pressure sensor. I got the fuel pressure set right at 43, and I happened to walk over and seeing it was barely seeping out, so I loosened it up, put it back together, and it leaked worse, and I did it again, and the fitting it doesn't feel right. It's not sealing up, so I'm just gonna have to order another one. But for now, I just bypassed that and just put the crossover line straight to it, just to get this thing going. Right now, I'm just gonna go through my inputs and outputs and set them up real quick. Set up all the parameters of everything I want to start with. You know, all the sensors, the dome sensor and all that stuff, but ain't no big deal. Just a little time consuming to go over everything and make sure it's all where it needs to be. As far as like the idle and all that stuff goes, they'll get more in depth once you get the thing running. I just seen where it was at. One thing, once you first get it started and get it running, you want to set the throttle screw so your IAC motor is like 10% or less. So if your IAC motor, which you could see when you go to your gauges or whatever, you could bring up your IAC position, and right here on your sensor's IAC position, and you want to get that, once it's warm, you want to get that down like 10%. So if it's too high, when you let off the throttle, sometimes it'll act weird and try to die and stuff. Made some changes where I gotta reset the or turn the key off and on. I'm not going to have any fuel pressure because I had to unhook it because that fitting was leaking. Let's see if this silly thing will start. Now I'm going to look over everything, check for leaks and all that. I didn't put any water in it yet, but oil pressure was in the mid 40s, so that ain't too bad as long as it doesn't drop too much when it's warm. So that's cool. We got her going. It's just, you know, takes a lot of time, but it's really not that big of a deal as long as you just follow the steps. I think the biggest thing is just having a good bass tune and, you know, just rechecking everything, going over everything with the fine-tooth comb. But that's it.